Today's episode of Entertainment Drive-Thru is brought to you by Audible.com. Audible.com has over 180,000 audiobooks and audio products. Get your free audiobook of your choice at audibletrial.com/edrivethru.
Welcome to Entertainment Drive-Thru. Today's special is Jonathan Freeman, Jafar from Aladdin.
Quiet on the set.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to
Hello, welcome to Entertainment Drive-Thru. I'm Anna, with me is my co-host Dan, and today we have an amazing guest with us. You may know him as Jafar in Aladdin. Let's welcome the one, the only, Jonathan Freeman!
Yeah, welcome to the show.
Hello.
How's it going?
Well, good. How are you?
Good. And I have to comment real quick.
Where are you, by the way?
We are actually, this is really deceptive. Our phone number is very deceptive. We're in Iceland.
Yeah, we went from LA to Iceland, from hot to cold, literally.
Oh, Iceland. I've heard it's lovely.
It is gorgeous. But I have to make a comment about, not only are you Jafar, but you were Jafar in the movies. You were also Jafar in the Kingdom Hearts games. You were also Jafar and are Jafar on Broadway.
Yeah.
Which is very impressive for someone to be all of those things.
Yes, as I apply the cement to my face every evening and look in the mirror, I think to myself, if this goes on much longer, I won't have to put makeup on at all.
And I think it's crazy. I mean, with the fact that you've done it in so many things, I mean, you essentially, without the hopefully without the actual evilness, you are Jafar.
Well, you've only done part of your homework, I must say. Because in addition to the things that you mentioned, there are probably dozens of others, which I can't even remember, so I can't admonish you too much. But, there are installations at Disney World in which Jafar appears, and I've done the voicing for it. There were board games.
Yeah.
There were books on tape. I mean, it goes on and on. It's really been an interesting association, if that's the right way to put it. I mean, Jafar and I have been together now for 23 or 24 years.
Wow. Yeah. And I think that's amazing, because you never think of that in how much it is, like in how much Jafar is. And I love that you point that out, because, for example, here in Iceland, we don't get everything. So maybe that's why we didn't think of that. But my God, that's amazing. So yeah, you and Jafar, you are one. It's amazing.
Many of those things are things that happened long ago, first of all, maybe even before you were born. I have no idea how old you are. I wouldn't think to ask on the air. But I mean, I did the voicing for like Jafar and the Ice Show, things like that too. And commercials and things like that, in which he just appears sometimes for a second,
Right.
Sometimes for more than a second. Sometimes he makes an appearance at an electric parade in Tokyo or something, and they have dragged me into. So it's been going on for a long time, and it is certainly not anything that you would know. I mean, it's been numerous things, as most people who have done voices for Disney have discovered. It ends up being kind of an ongoing part of your life. And it's very nice. I mean, I look back on it, and I tried to think, and I actually did a little research once, and I got kind of bored, frankly, so I stopped. But I was trying to figure out who else that I knew of, actors, had... well, first of all, I don't think any other actor has taken an animated character into another medium. That's one thing that's sort of a first. But I couldn't think of very many actors in the world, and I certainly don't know all of them in every country in the world, but that has had a character that they've been identified with and done so much work with for so many years. I mean, I thought there was a guy at the turn of the century whose name was William Gillette, and he played Sherlock Holmes for most of his career. Yeah. And then, of course, there's wonderful Carol Channing, who played Dolly Levi in Hello, Dolly for a good part of her career. I couldn't think of many more, and when I tried to research it, like I said, I got a little bit bored with my own idea, but it is an interesting idea that you can have a character and it can be with you for such a long time. And in this case, I mean, most people haven't any idea what I look like or where I'm from or what I really sound like because he, in a sense, is a stronger personality than I am.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why I was saying it's so impressive because, I mean, the other thing is, like, usually when you know, studios get a voice for the characters, usually they just do, I mean, they might do, you know, the three that I mentioned, you know, the movie, the video game, and if they're lucky, you know, even on Broadway. But then oftentimes the studio will replace that actor with another actor for one project and then with another actor for another project. It's almost never just one person for everything.
Is that right?
At least from what I've noticed.
I guess that's true. I don't, you know what, I don't know, but
so we're impressed with you. That's all we're saying.
Well, thank you very much.
Right.
But what is the once they find out you're Jafar, because if they don't know it, what do they ask you to say a specific line or something? I always wonder that with voice actors, if there's like a specific line that everybody remembers and wants you to repeat.
You know, sometimes, I mean, there's several of them. I mean, he has a lot of kind of great lines, you know, that people do seem to remember, and but that, you know, that largely that has to do with the writing. I mean, it was very good writing.
Oh yeah,
and so it makes it memorable. And then I think also people imagine the image too. When I first did it, when the movie first came out, and people would say to me, "Oh, say a line for my kid or something," and I would be very flattered by it, and I'd say, "Okay," and I'd do a line, and the kid would look at me like I was a damn imposter.
Right.
They'd be like, "That's not Jafar," because there's no image to go with it. I guess they're expecting me to transform, and they'd look at me like, "Where's the turban? Where's the bird? Where's all this fire? Where's the stuff?" You know?
Right.
And so I took to asking kids to close their eyes, and I'd whisper something in their ear, which is a little more effective because then they could conjure up their own image. But I don't know. It's not, you know, it's very flattering,
right,
that people remember stuff of his. And I'm always amazed what people do remember and what they think of.
Right. Well, and you know, we're getting a little bit out of order here, but I did want to take a bit of a step back here. And I wanted to ask about, you know, you as an entertainer. You know, how did you get started as an entertainer?
Well, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay.
And Cleveland, Ohio, as you may know, was, may or may not know, your audiences may or may not know, that one of the oldest, if not the oldest, regional theater in the United States was in Cleveland, which was called the Cleveland Playhouse.
Nice.
So, you know, there's the Cleveland Playhouse, there was ACT in San Francisco. You know, there are a lot of regional theaters that have existed, the Guthrie and the Oslo, and they still exist, a lot of them. So I grew up in Cleveland. I did a lot of children's theater, starting about the age of 8. And oddly enough, a lot of the roles I've been doing, you know, like in the last 15 years are roles that I did as a kid.
No way! Like what?
Old guys, you know. And
you played that as a kid?
Well, you know, in children's theater, usually like the tallest kid plays the father, or you know, or plays the evil guy, or like, you know, the biggest girl plays like, you know, the evil sorceress, or, you know what I mean? It's just how it is in children's theater. I mean, you know, if you're bigger, you play an adult. If you're small, you play a kid, but it's all kids.
Right.
It's just, you know, you get typecast even at an early age. It wasn't a tragedy for me because even as a young kid, I always loved those characters. I mean, I loved the crazy, psychotic, you know, villains and villainesses in Disney animated movies, and also in other movies and TV shows and stuff too. I always liked the crazy people. It always seemed a lot more fun to me. I'm the same way, yeah. No interest in the nice people, the princes and the princesses. I mean, I always felt that they were just sort of secondary, you know, characters. If you asked me what Aladdin was about, I would say, it's about an evil sorcerer,
Yes!
blah, 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 blah.
Jafar agrees with me. That's what I've been saying for years.
Somehow they still call the project Aladdin.
I know. Well, that's what I've been saying for years. I mean, actually, it's funny because for 3 years I actually went to school in Michigan for singing opera, and I had a low baritone bass voice, and I was always being told that if I continued with opera, I was going to be the bad guy in everything that I got cast for. And I started thinking about that, and I was like, well, that's actually not a bad thing, because I was looking back at, actually this is when I started thinking about it, is I started realizing why I loved the villains so much as a kid is because they had all the character. They had all of the, the aspects that made them fun. The hero was just the hero. I mean, Aladdin was a little more fun than the typical Disney hero, but, most of them are just like, I'll save you, princess. But, then you've got the villain that has like that, sneaky aspect to him. He's got that clever aspect to him. He's got that, really, really evil bit to him. There's so much, underlining to him that it makes them more interesting to me.
Well, yeah, the heroes and the heroines are just kind of like big tools and bimbos. And I always say, and I think it is true, that if you don't have a good villain in a story, you don't really have a good story.
No, you don't.
You need to have conflict, and you need to have something for them to push against in order for it to be something, in order for there to be some kind of a dynamic that makes it interesting to read or see or listen to, whatever format it's in. And, you mentioned beginning your career in opera. I always feel like these characters, Jafar and Maleficent, and the list goes on. I always feel that those characters sort of live in that kind of operatic scale.
Yeah,
I think that there's something about their size, their temperament. Usually, if they're not complete, wrecks, torn down reprobates, they're very grand, and they usually present these silhouettes that are pretty dynamic. And I think that is, there's listen, I can tell you, because the amount of mail I get from kids for 23 years, there is a percentage of kids who really are attracted to that because they think it's fun. It doesn't mean that they're bad kids. They really do. They just like the fun of villains, and also usually that goes along with them. I'm enjoying the sidekicks and stuff too.
We're going to take a quick break to listen to a clip from The Villains Medley, performed by Jonathan Freeman. But we'll be right back.
So Ali turns out to be merely Aladdin. Just a con, need I go on, take it from me. His personality flaws give me adequate cause to send him packing on a one-way trip. His prospects take a terminal dip. His assets frozen, the venue chosen, the end of the world. Whee! So long, ex-prince
I wanted to ask, because we talked about how you got into the entertainment industry, but when is that moment that you realized that being an entertainer is exactly what you wanted to be, or what you were meant to do? It wasn't going to be being an evil sorcerer. You wanted to be in the entertainment industry.
Well, it happened I think there are two definitive times in my life that I can remember. One is, there was a time when my parents were getting ready to separate, and I went one day to the theater to see a children's theater performance with, I think, my mother, maybe my father. I can't really remember. And I remember seeing a live play for the first time when I was about 7, or 8. And I remember saying to whichever parent I was with, and I wish I could remember who, but I said, I think I'd like to do that.
Wow. Oh, wow.
And like the next day, I was, enrolled in some course, and I think, in a way, it was a great relief to them to know that there was something that I could do that would, give me some kind of pleasure, in the midst of some turmoil going on in my life. I think that's what happened anyway. So right away, seeing a live performance, and that's what I responded to, more than like film or television, although I love film and television and animation, and, there's a lot of other things I like, but live, there will never be a substitute for live performance, for
Right.
something that's
So
happening in front of you
true.
at that very moment. So that's one thing. And then I think the other, well, that was the beginning. I think that really was the very beginning. I mean, there was a time when I started, when I was, I guess probably, around the time I was pubescent or something, there was one of our teachers at Children's Theater whose name was Marilyn Bianchi, who was a fantastic teacher. And she was the one that kind of at a certain point made us realize somehow that it didn't just have to be something that we did, for fun, that if it was something we're interested in, there was actually an occupation that was known as acting.
Right.
And that it gave a lot of people pleasure in careers, and that it may actually be something that, we wanted to consider. And so that was sometime, I guess, around the time I was, 12 or 13, I guess. And,
Right.
And anyway.
Yeah. Well, and I, I'm always curious to ask this because, because Jafar has become such a legendary character, as we've basically been, talking about. And, I'm curious about, the start, like back in, whether it was, 91 or, whenever you first got the script of for Jafar, what were your initial thoughts of the character? And I mean, did you have any imagination that the movie or the character would ever be this huge?
Well, let's see. There's several things leading up to that. First of all, it was a time when Howard Ashman and Alan Menken, went to Disney with a 3-picture deal.
Right, yeah.
And it was The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin. I think it was actually supposed to be The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, and then Beauty and the Beast. But story-wise, one got pushed up, and, that's just Hollywood land.
Oh, yeah.
And they were composer and lyricist and book writers who I had known from musical theater in New York from the time that I moved here in 1972. It was also a time when Disney was having this, big resurgence in animation, and they co-opted a lot of production stage managers, which is a very specific job in New York, to come and be producers at Disney.
Okay.
They snagged a lot of really good, really important stage managers to go do that, because the skills set that you need to produce animated features is sort of like the kind of thing that you need to be a production stage manager for a new musical.
I can understand
if you
that,
think about an animated feature, like a Disney animated feature, is sort of like it's a musical, but there's one additional element, which is the animation. But there's, it's put together the same way. It's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. There's a period of research. There's a period of writing. There's a period of rewriting. And it goes on for a long time. I mean, at that time, it took about 5 or 6 years to make an animated feature.
Right, yeah.
And they didn't even bring actors in until after the first 2 or 3. They brought actors in for about, well, if you had a big part, usually like the last 2 years of production.
Interesting.
So I worked, I think, 1 year and 9 months on Aladdin, starting in January of 91. So when I got the script in the end of 1990, it was exciting because I knew that I knew a lot of the people working on the project, and I knew it would be good. It was a story that I was familiar with since I was a kid from children's theater.
Right.
It was a character that I was familiar with because I'd done those kinds of characters my whole life growing up. And then there's another factor which is kind of weird, which is I was doing an off-Broadway musical with Nathan Lane at the time that was called In a Pig's Valise.
Okay.
And the music and lyrics were by Kid Creole and the Coconuts, and it had been cast by a wonderful casting director named Albert Tavares. Albert Tavares is the man who ultimately cast Aladdin.
Nice.
So years before I even auditioned for Aladdin, I was playing this crazy psychotic villain in this off-Broadway musical called In a Pig's Valise. And then years went by, and so you see what I'm saying is it doesn't just sort of happen. It's not like one thing happens. It's like this weird confluence of things that happens all at once, and they sort of come together. And I had a representative at the time who was loved animation and was happy to submit clients and try to get them appointments, and she did in fact get me an appointment. And they sent me a preliminary drawing, and as soon as I saw the drawing and I read the scenes they had sent me, it was just kind of like I didn't know that they were going to give it to me, but I knew that it was something that I could do.
Right.
It was like it was ingrained in me from the time I was a kid, from examining and re-examining those characters that I loved and doing them in children's theater and doing these crazy characters off Broadway in this musical. And the idea that this man, Albert Tavares, who unfortunately passed away not long after the film was made, there was just all these connections. And when you don't know it at the time, at the time you're just like, you're just going along. And then when you look back on it, you're like, wow, look at all these things that happened that actually brought it together.
Right.
Even recently I was on a train, recently I was on a train with Gilbert Godfrey going somewhere for a function. And,
nice.
We both agreed that when we were offered the jobs and took them, it was a good job. We didn't think, you don't think, oh, this is going to be fantastic. I mean, I thought to myself, wow, well, Robin Williams, Gilbert Godfrey, that's slightly edgier than most animated features at Disney. Maybe possibly there'll be something else going on here. It's a story that I think is still one of the great stories of all time.
Oh, yeah.
To be told. So you see what I mean? It's not something that you know at the moment, at the time. I mean, you always hope that every project you go to work on is going to be a success. I mean, otherwise you'd say, well, I don't want to do this because I think it's going to be a big flop.
Right.
You never start a project, any new project, that way. You always start it by thinking, I have something to bring to the table. That's the reason they cast me. All these people that I'm working with are fantastic, and I know that they all have great things to bring to the table, and I can't wait to get going on it, and let's see what happens.
Right.
Exactly.
And that's kind of what you do, And believe me, Aladdin was very troubled from the beginning. There was a lot of bumpiness getting it off the ground, and it still managed to get off the ground and be done and get done. So there you are. I think that answers your question in a
more than answered the question
way than you wanted to hear. But it's not possible to say I got the script, I knew that they would like me, I read it, I knew it was going to be a success. You don't know any of that.
No,
Right.
but thank you so much for talking us through it, because I love that you point out that the casting director saw you before, because he must have really even liked you back then, because I feel like casting directors normally remember those people who you impress. It doesn't really matter from when. Did he recognize you when he saw you again? Or?
Well, that's the amazing.
Yeah. Oh no, we knew each other because he had cast me in the other show.
Yeah.
But I mean, the fact is, it was, again, who knows if this is a sign of the times too, but it was a lot simpler too. I mean, when I went to audition originally for Aladdin, I went into a small studio at a rehearsal space. There was me, the guy that I brought with me to play the piano for the song that I had to sing, and Albert Tavares sitting at a tape recorder, and that's it.
Wow.
And at the time, it was a reel-to-reel tape recorder.
Which song did you sing?
Microchips,
Which song did you choose for your audition?
I sang this crazy song from an operetta
Nice.
that was called Play Gypsies, Dance Gypsies, and it was from some ridiculous Hungarian operetta called, I think, The Countess Maritza or something.
Okay.
It was completely ridiculous, but it was very kind of dark and appropriate. And
nice.
So, you just try to choose something that you think is appropriate and will support the sound and the kind of character that you're going to be doing in the scene. That's really the best. Again, that's the best you can hope for, because you don't know what songs that, Howard Ashman, Alan Menken are busily writing.
Right.
I mean, it's all a big question mark.
Yeah. And so far with your career to this point, what has been one of the biggest challenges for you, and what have you done to overcome it?
I guess the first big challenge is that when I started I started my career professionally, I was, when you're a young man or a young woman, and you have a lot of energy and you have great looks, and there's a limited amount of things that you can do. There are great characters, and I always knew that I was a character actor. I always knew that the parts that I wanted to do, that they wouldn't all be available to me when I was 22 years old. I had to make peace with that. And when characters did come along, young characters who were also evil, like, for example, there's that crazy guy on that show Gotham. Carol Kane plays his mother, whoever that character is. I can't remember the character. Anyway, he's terrific, and he's a young guy. But the Penguin, I think he's a young Penguin.
Okay.
Nice.
But you know, there just aren't that many. You find them in classical pieces of theater. You find, you know, those kinds of characters in Shakespeare and Wycherley and Congreve and stuff, but you don't find them in contemporary work. And so that was the first thing. I just had to be patient and sit it out.
Right.
And keep working and taking the jobs I could get. I played so many juveniles. I played so many tools and so many shows until I finally, you know, found something that things started to happen because I sort of grew into it.
Right,
So
exactly.
that was an obstacle that was just kind of there, and it was kind of obvious, and you just gotta hang in there. There were always a few characters along the way, you know, playing Bud Frump and How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, and some young character type villain character things that were available, but you really had to just wait. So that was the first obstacle, I guess.
Yeah. Well, speaking of things that are challenging, we actually have a new challenge for you today.
Okay.
Because we are up to our segment, The Question of the Day. Today's episode of Entertainment Drive-Thru is brought to you by Audible.com. Audible.com is offering listeners a free audiobook of your choice and a free 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/edrivethru and choose from over 180,000 audio programs. Download a title free and start listening. It's just that easy. Go to audibletrial.com/edrivethru. That's audibletrial.com/edrivethru and get started today.
Oh, Lord, let's go.
Right. All right. So your question is, and I feel like this is actually going to be one of the serious answers, but that we get. But we'll see. So in real life, if you had a magic lamp with a genie inside, what would be your 3 wishes?
Ooh.
Well, you know what? I've been through this question before, to be honest with you. Because
I kind of figured that would have happened at least once or twice.
We just promoted the re-release of Aladdin on Blu-ray.
Yeah. Congratulations, by the way.
Pardon me?
I said congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I didn't hear you. Linda Larkin, who played Jasmine, and Gilbert Godfrey, who played Diago, and myself were on in a talk show one day, and they asked us each, like, if we had a wish, not 3, but a wish, what we would wish for.
Okay.
And I have to say, and it had been asked to me a year before at Christmas time, and this is going to sound really stupid, but you know, if you're an old hippie, you're an old hippie. And I said, you know what? I was asked this question last year, and I'm sticking to it. What I would really wish for, and it'll probably never happen, but you're asking me for a wish, is world peace.
Yeah.
Right.
I just can't stand it. I just can't stand that people are blowing people up all the time these days. It's driving me absolutely crazy. And
it's getting worse and worse.
I don't know. I guess maybe, you know, if we actually had a genie in a lamp that could solve it. That really is one of the things I'd wish for.
Oh,
I wish
yeah.
for health for myself and my friends and my family. I guess that's 3 wishes right there. But you know, I pretty much am a pragmatist. I'd probably ask for pretty real things, nothing too crazy. Linda Larkin said, I'd wish that the next time this movie is released in some other format in the future, that we'll all still be here together to promote it.
Nice.
Yeah, right. And everybody went, even I went, Linda, that's so nice of you. And then I said, Gilbert, what would you wish for? And he said, I wish that when I got home tonight, and I can't remember who he said, some, you know, blonde movie star would be in my bed.
Right.
I think he said Scarlett Johansson, actually. Gilbert, that's so sweet.
By the way, side note about Gilbert Godfrey, I love that he doesn't actually like shout just when he's talking. I love that he actually does have a normal voice, but when he's like on the camera or whatever, he's just so used to doing that shouty voice that no one knows that.
That's right. Here's the thing. He always hates it when I tell people this. Gilbert Godfrey is a really nice guy.
Right.
He's a very decent. He's not. I mean, he may. One of my favorite lines was always, by the way, was "I love the way your foul little mind works."
Right.
He doesn't really have a crazy psychotic foul mind, or if he does, it really is for comic effect. He's a nice guy. He's 2 kids who were hilarious.
Aww.
Right.
So, I don't know.
Yeah.
What about with?
Of course, if there's more than 3 people in a room, it constitutes an audience, and then the switch goes on, like you said. Yeah.
Right. Well, and actually,
wait, was that part of a question I'm supposed to be answering?
No, you were doing it perfectly.
But I actually, just for you, we actually have a second question of the day for you. So, and hopefully this is one that you haven't been asked before. But I mean, it's Disney related, so you never know. But this is actually because you and I agree that the villains were the better characters. I wanted to ask you, who would you say are your top 3 favorite Disney villains? And if you say Jafar as one of them, who are your top 4 favorite Disney villains?
Wow, that's a good one. I have to admit, I probably do have more than 4.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I love them all.
I'll tell you the ones that I think influenced me the most.
Okay.
Captain Hook, who's the voice of Hans, Hans Conried, who was a fantastic character actor.
Yeah.
Maleficent, who is like Jafar's sister.
That is so true.
Fact, yeah, it is true, right? And there's did you ever see that show called House of Mouse?
No.
It was a TV show that was like old Disney cartoons, and they created these wraparound segments to introduce them.
Nice.
And they created this club that Mickey Mouse was the owner of, and Minnie Mouse was the hostess, and she would seat characters. Anyway, so there was an episode where Jafar was sitting at a table with Maleficent, and he was kind of hitting on her, and he says to her something like, "My dear, you and I have so much in common. I have a funny hat, you have a funny hat. I have a staff, you have a staff. I have a bird, you have a bird." Anyway, so I have to say Maleficent would be one of the top 3, and I'm not going to say who'd be number 1, 2, and 3. I just can't.
Right.
Because they didn't come in, they came in the order that I met them when I was growing up at whatever age that was. So it's not really fair. They take on different importance at different times in your life.
Well, you know what's funny though, real quick about Maleficent, I just have to say before I lose it, is that I think it's kind of funny that Maleficent is kind of like Jafar's evil sister. And it sounds weird because they're both evil, but I feel like Maleficent just has that slightly more evil like side of her that is just, you go, wait, whoa.
Well, I think it's because she's, honestly, it's because she's a woman, and she has that. She has this fantastic ability to be so unbelievably charming.
Yeah.
She has some of the most charming lines, and she has that certain thing that I love in the Disney villainesses, which is a sort of cruel beauty. I mean, I actually find her so smooth and beautiful that I get it.
Yeah.
How she could be such a great villain because she's so attractive. And I mean, that's one of the things that the women villainesses or villains have over the men villains, is this incredible beauty, that this smooth, cruel beauty that really makes you want to kind of fall in love with them a little bit.
Yeah.
I can't say that happens with any of the male characters. They're all a little bit snaggly, gnarly, crazy. So my the third one would be, oh God, it's kind of a toss-up.
Between,
I mean, early on in my life, I was very attracted to, what was his name? Now it's just gone out of my head. The villain in The Puppet Master in Pinocchio. Stromboli.
Yeah.
Stromboli. I thought he was a great. He's just so volatile. Such a big slob of a character. I was very attracted to that kind of like that volatile nature, I guess.
You weren't kidding about the character acting side of it. Those are all like those big, like character actor type of characters.
I wish I could remember the name of the guy who played Stromboli. maybe you look it up and stick it in the show.
Right.
Because Eleanor Audley is the voice of Maleficent, and Hans Conried is Captain Hook. But listen, there have been so many since then. I mean, I love Pat Carroll, and she's a friend. I mean, she's fantastic. Ursula is one of the best.
Yes. Oh, man.
You know?
Yeah.
And Scar, Jeremy Irons, Scar is one of the best.
Oh my goodness.
That's still the problem. It also depends on, as you say, when you grew up, because I grew up like in the kind of like 80s, 90s. So like the ones I was scared of was of course Ursula, because like Little Mermaid was one of the like earlier movies that I saw. And then like Scar was just insane. And then you as like Jafar, I mean, it just, it depends on when you see the movies. I mean, at what stage in your life, because those are the ones that affect you very differently as an adult as opposed to a kid.
Yeah, I feel like
I think you're right, Anna. It depends like what age you are, like how it informs you at that age. I think, because that's usually when you see these things originally, when you're a kid, and they have some effect. Listen, I have a good friend, wonderful director named Des McAnuff, who at the time when I met him was the artistic director of the La Jolla Playhouse, and he has a lovely daughter named Julia Violet, and years after I'd done the movie, he said to me, "I have to confess something. I've never actually seen your performance in that movie yet." And I was like, "Why? You're supposed to be a friend of mine. What do you mean you haven't seen it?" He said, "Well, every time the music got weird or a shadow would come into the frame, Julia Violet would fast forward."
Oh.
No.
So it took him years before I actually got to see it. That was funny. It's a funny idea.
By the way, we found out who Stromboli is.
Who?
Charles Udels.
Oh, Charles Udels.
Yeah.
How's it spelled? D-E-L-L?
It says J-U-D-E-L-S.
Oh,
Charles
Udels.
Oh, sorry, Udels or Udels, or I don't know how to.
Yes. The Icelander and you would say Udels, but it's Judels.
Oh, sorry, Judels.
You know what? I'm not sure that I actually did remember it then. I thought I was remembering something. Well, there you are.
At least that's what Google says. Maybe it's wrong.
That's the power of the character, is it didn't matter who did the voice. It was the character that did it for you,
No, listen, I didn't know who Eleanor Audley was or who Hans Conried was.
Right,
but I can tell you that at the time when there were all these TV series that were on, Eleanor Audley was on like the I Love Lucy show, and she was on like 20 other TV shows at the time. And the same thing with Hans Conried. In addition to doing Broadway shows, he played this character named Uncle Tanoose, who was Danny Thomas's uncle in a series called Make Room for Daddy. I mean, again, you see, it's just these are so far before your time. You'll have to Google them and find these people. But you see them, doing these other characters. And I would remember thinking, that voice seems familiar to me. And so I started putting it together, and I was like, wow, so you could be the voice of a cartoon, and you could also play another completely other character.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. Well, I guess getting back to the interview now that we've had our Disney fun, but we're going to continue to have some Disney fun. But I wanted to move on to the advice section here because, I wanted to ask, so far with your career to this point, this is another career as a whole question, but what has been some of the best advice that someone's given you along the way that maybe you would give to someone just getting started, and special request that you do it as in the voice of Jafar?
Oh, Lord. I've worked with some really, really great people, wonderful people, great people who were stars at the time, and wonderful actors, people with a lot of good sense that gave me a lot of good advice. I can tell you that one person once said to me that I should stop fucking around and just do it. That's what they said. Just do it.
I love that advice because it sounds so funny, but it is so true because like so many people just live their lives wanting to do something and they dream about it, but they never actually get off their ass and do it.
It's not only that, it's just also with us artistic types, we tend to do a lot of things, not do a lot of things, but think of a lot of things, create a lot of things, but then there's the actual doing of it, which can seem kind of exhausting to people who are very creative.
Yeah, and I realized I asked you to do that in the voice of Jafar, but I didn't really need to because you are Jafar.
Well, I just did.
So, I just
did it in his voice. I said, just do it.
Right. Exactly.
I worked with a wonderful woman named Sybil Christopher, who was the first Mrs. Richard Burton, who was a producer of a theater I worked at. And she once said to me, this is years later after somebody saying to me, just do it, meaning just to, she once said to me when I was working on it, she said, the thing that I like about you, Jonathan, is that you're like a British actor. You just do it. So it was the same, it was the same three words, but it was used in a different context.
Right.
And I think that's, you just do it. Like, I don't want to hear your backstory. I don't want to find out all of your subtext. I don't need to know all that. Let's just do it.
Exactly.
I think it's, I think that as a young actor, could be a little bit elaborate and excessive. And it's, you learn how to sort of edit things as you go along. I mean, art is really selectivity.
Right.
And the more selective you are, the clearer it is, what it is you're doing.
Right. Well, and actually, because we're getting close to the end here, I wanted to actually go to a brand new section of the show, and this is just for this interview. It's time for Unanswered Questions. So now I'm sure, and then again, I'm sure this is something that you've probably heard at least once or twice, but I have to ask it on the show because this has been driving me crazy since I saw the movie. But as you both probably know, there have been tons and tons of rumors and myths about Disney movies. Some are not so Disney friendly, but there is actually a question that has been left unanswered in Aladdin, and I'm curious what your thoughts are. If Genie turned Aladdin into, as Jafar called him, Prince Abubu, did he actually create an entire kingdom of people to actually make him a prince? And if not, how would he actually be a prince?
Whoa, wait a minute. Say that again?
So if you think,
that was a little complicated,
right? So if you think about it, when Aladdin wished to be a prince, now did Genie actually have to create an entire kingdom of people to make him a prince of a place, and if not, how did he actually end up as a prince?
Marrying princes. No, I was kidding.
Because if there's no kingdom, he's not a prince.
Well, but. First of all, I think you have to put it in the context of this. First of all, probably, the real answer to that is probably don't be so literal. But I think the truth is, if you put it in the context of the time, which is ancient Arabia, far away and long ago, a kingdom could be so far away that nobody would know.
True. Where
it is, you may or may not know that the story of Aladdin, which is one of the stories of the 1001 Arabian Nights tales, was originally set in China.
Really?
And the reason it was set in China was because China was so far away and so inaccessible to where the stories were actually written originally that the people who were writing took great pleasure in knowing that they could make up things like flying carpets, genies in bottles, flying horses, you name it. They could make all these things up, and
they would never know.
Read these stories for the first time and say, "Wow, is that a reality? Do you think that could really exist?" So that's why these stories took on these sort of mythical qualities. But it was originally set in China in the original story.
Well, and I was going to
but not the China that you and I know, because we know a lot about China now, but the China that nobody knew about, and they just had a vague recollection of a few things maybe that had come, to them through China or something. So
that would be a very different cast.
Well, and I was going to say though, could you imagine though if he actually did create an entire, or if there actually was an entire kingdom of people just going, now I know he's not from here, but Genie's a good friend of ours. Let's make this Aladdin kid prince of our kingdom.
Well, wait a minute. We know that he turns the monkey into the elephant.
That's true.
And he turns other stuff into other stuff, right? I can't remember all the different things.
Because he does actually create a bunch. He creates the whole parade of people.
So basically, he could have just taken, like in Cinderella, a bunch of mice and rats and dogs and cats and just waved his magic and created that, because we see that parade. So in effect, he does create an entire kingdom.
That's true. Yeah, because
he creates enough people at least to give the impression that they're coming from somewhere. And then as soon as they leave the building, he can just make them evaporate so that no one wonders where they are, I guess.
Right. Well, unfortunately, we are getting down to the end of our interview.
No.
I know. This is one of those interviews. I have like 2 hours more of questions to ask.
Wait.
All right, we'll do it another time.
Right, exactly.
Wait, before we leave, have you ever gone trick-or-treating as Jafar? I mean, nobody knows who you are. Have you ever dressed up? I mean, besides on the Broadway play.
That's the beauty of being a voice actor. No one knows.
Have you ever been to a what?
No,
Wait,
because
I didn't understand. You have ever been to a what?
No, not a trick-or-treat, but have you ever been not on Broadway, but on
like for Halloween?
Yeah, for Halloween. Have you ever been Jafar? Since you're already him.
No. Oh no. No.
But you have the cape or anything?
I like how fast that answer was. Oh no.
But
no. No. I would be afraid to take him out in some other reality. I think that wouldn't be fair to either him or to me.
Right. Well, and I do have to get one last question in here because I promised a friend I would ask this, is because Jafar does have one of the most menacing laughs out there. Did you have to practice that laugh, or do you have a slightly evil side to you that just makes it naturally that evil?
No, I did. Well, I did. It was a little impromptu to begin with, but when you make an animated feature, I mean, I think I mentioned this. I worked for a year and 9 months. So it's sort of like two steps forward, one step back. And like for example, the diamond that he steals from the Sultan's amulet that he grinds down to make the sands of time. During the year and 9 months, it was alternatively like a dragon's eye ruby, a tiger's eye topaz, some kind of an emerald, until they finally arrived at this idea of diamond in the rough. So he'll steal a diamond, grind it down, make the sands of time, blah, blah, blah. So in the same way, the laugh was kind of like a developmental thing. Like one day they'd say to me, okay, we need a 10-second laugh. We need a 30-second laugh. We need a laugh that we can fade out on. We need a very quiet laugh. We need a 5-second laugh, So there would be days when I would, for an hour, I would just do laughs or the sounds of, getting smacked with a cane or, whatever.
Right.
So it was just developmental. I mean, it's like everything else. I'm sorry to disappoint your friend. No, that's really evil, but
did you think of something when you did it?
I have to say, I've always admired villains' evil laughs. I mean, think about Margaret Hamilton's evil laugh in The Wizard of Oz. I mean, think about Lon Chaney's laugh in just about anything. They're great. They're great laughs, and if you can create a great laugh that's so identifiable,
it's really special.
It's something, yeah. I mean, you got to really dig down deep.
Yeah. Well, as I said, we are down to the end now. But before we go, where are places that our listeners can find out more information about the great Jafar, a.k.a. Jonathan Freeman?
About Jafar? Oh, gosh. I guess the Disney websites, there's so many of them, and they're constantly producing new things. I just recorded a villains medley of songs that's on a website for Disney called Disney Sessions.
No worries about Jafar, but what about you? We want to hear where we can reach
personally?
You. Yeah, I know. It's hard to differentiate.
Nowhere. I've been hiding behind Jafar for 24 years. I don't know. I mean, I guess you could Google me or something. You mean, do I have a website? I don't do any of that. I'm kind of,
You do have an IMDb, though.
Yeah, there's all of that stuff. That's what I mean.
There's a Wikipedia page of things that, well, it's Wikipedia. They may or may not be true.
You know what they should really have? They should have a Wikipedia.
Oh, yeah. That's a good idea.
That's like a Wikipedia page, but it's just every villain that's been in history. I think
there's a Disney wiki.
But there's not Wicked, yeah. But
there's no Wikipedia. But I think there's a Disney.
I know there's a list of villains that are ranked somehow. there's something like, the top 10 or something like that. Jafar's usually like in the top 5. They float back and forth between the most to the, and then I don't know. I mean, there's tons of stuff online, about me. I think you should talk to Karen. I think that there is a website that she kind of manages that has stuff on it for me.
Right.
I don't have I'm not on Facebook. I don't Twitter and tweet and all of that stuff. I understand that people do it constantly now, and it helps make them have huge careers. It's just not my thing.
Right. Well, I think the moral of the story is, to the listeners, you can go to Google and search for Jonathan Freeman, and you will find all Jafar and Jonathan Freeman goodies.
Yeah.
Well, you'll find a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there are songs that Jafar, there are so many songs that were written. We didn't even really talk that much about the development of it, but
yeah,
there's a couple of songs online that were in pencil test form that never made it out of pencil test. One of them is called the dubious distinction of having recorded the last song that Howard Ashman wrote before he died, called Humiliate the Boy. There's another song that's called Why Me? And on the new Blu-ray, DVD Blu-ray, they've added a song on the end called My Finest Hour, which was a song that I think it's also like in storyboard or pencil test or something. And that was another one of the 7 songs of Jafar's that are out there floating in the ether. And there's yet another one in the show that we're doing now called Diamond in the Rough.
Nice.
And I love how you point that out, because a lot of the songs that we absolutely love, like from Little Mermaid, Part of Your World, it wasn't even supposed to be. They wanted to cut it. And the same with, like all these great songs that were supposed to be cut.
I like how there was a little bit of anger behind that.
There is anger. I love that song.
You were like, it was one of the songs that we love, and they cut it.
They almost wanted to cut it. Like, that's so mean. And I feel that with some of the songs, like some great songs that you find online, you're like, why wasn't this in there? I get that they have to edit things, but come on. Like,
although I'm not going to lie, I heard like 1 or 2 of the songs from Beauty and the Beast that were supposed to be in the movie that were cut. Those ones I was okay with being cut. I thought the others were much better.
Do you miss any songs that were like cut?
Well, there was tons of songs that were in probably almost every film or musical that went by the wayside. I mean, there were even characters in the original Aladdin that were cut that are now back in the musical.
Nice.
But one of the most beautiful ballads that Howard and Alan ever wrote, called "Proud of Your Boy," is back in the show. It was written for the film. I heard it in demo form in a studio back in 1991, and then the next time I heard it was when Alan Menken sat down at the piano to play it at Howard Ashman's memorial service, to a big portrait, and broke my heart. And then it was out there, and then I think somebody might have covered it at one point, but it didn't really resurface until they went back to work on the show, and they decided to recover a lot of Howard's stuff, rightfully so, because at least with the case of Proud of Your Boy, it really is one of the most magnificent songs, and I would hate to have thought that it would have been lost or just gone into some other film for some other character, because it's perfectly written for the character, and it's perfectly placed in the show right now. So, unfortunately, that's just the nature of making art, like, again, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I mean, things change, the show has no animals in it, so there's no bird, there's no monkey, there's a lot of things, but there's other things that replace it that are equally as good, and it still stays true to the original story and to Disney's version too. So,
are you getting? Because I heard you were afraid of birds, or so you're glad that the bird is gone.
I'm not really afraid of them. I'm a little afraid of them. I think.
Don't worry, one of my best friend, he can't stand birds too, so it's a thing.
Your best friend in Aladdin is a bird.
I love birds to look at them. I think. I mean, I actually just came back from South Africa and saw some magnificent birds and other kinds of crazy creatures. I mean, but I don't know, like when a bird, have you ever held a bird?
No. I have, but it was a long time ago.
They kind of, they have those nails that just kind of dig into you, and a little bit like a cat sometimes. Like cats and birds are both, I'm not really afraid of them, but they just don't sort of suit me. They have minds of their own, and also with a bird, and I think I might have mentioned this once in an interview, I'm actually kind of afraid that they could just peck your eyes out.
I don't blame you. That is scary. Now I'm scared. My God.
That's from watching
from the Hitchcock movie.
I was just going to say, yeah.
It scares me to death.
Well, on that note, because I guess for try number 3, thank you so much for being on the show. It's really been an absolute honor to talk to you. Next year is the 25th year of Aladdin, so maybe we'll get you back on for 25 years, and we'll just do part 2.
Right, it's 25 years.
Oh, no. That's in 2 years. My math is off. Next year will be 24 years.
Are you? It was released in 92.
Right. So next year being 2016, it will be 24 years.
Right.
Yeah,
that's right.
For some reason, I had in my mind it was already 2016.
My timeline with Aladdin is different because I auditioned for it in 1990, and it took many months before I got a call that said that you booked the job, and I started to work in January of 91, and I completed sometime in 92, shortly before it was released, I guess.
Wow.
So technically, next year is your 25th year.
Ha.
For me, it is, yeah.
So we'll get a technical 25th anniversary part 2 next year.
Cool.
But to the listeners, for more information on Jafar, Jonathan, the podcast, and more, go to entertainmentdrivethru.com and subscribe on iTunes. Like and follow us on our Facebook at facebook.com/entertainmentdrivethru and our Twitter and Instagram at edrivethru.
Hello, this is Jonathan Freeman, and you've been listening to Entertainment Drive-Thru.